Meanwhile, I was about to leave for one of the best universities in the country and finally escape them forever. They couldn't allow that. To them, I wasn't their son. I was their daughter's life support system. And the second I understood that, my fear disappeared completely. Actually, I became calm, very calm, because if they wanted to put on a show, then fine, I'd play along too, but this time, I would control the ending. So while riding the train back, I started preparing. I bought a cheap backup phone, a power bank, cloud recording software. Then I tested everything multiple times. Automatic upload, location sharing, emergency contacts. Honestly, I was preparing less like a college student, and more like someone about to expose a criminal organization. Then I messaged a few future roommates from my university group chat. I told them, if nobody hears from me for 48 hours, call the police. And surprisingly, they immediately agreed. No hesitation. One guy even replied, "Bro, your family sounds insane. Stay safe." And honestly, that message hit me hard, because complete strangers cared more about my safety than my own parents ever had. By the time I reached home, it was already evening. The apartment building looked exactly the same as always. Cold, gray, lifeless. Then I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. My mother opened it, and the second she saw me, her entire expression changed. Suddenly she was smiling warmly, acting excited. "Xiaotian, you're finally back. Come in." And honestly, that terrified me more than if she had started yelling, because my mother had never welcomed me home like that before. I walked into the apartment carefully, scanning everything, and there he was, my father, sitting on the couch, watching TV, completely healthy, no hospital, no emergency, just lies. So I stood there holding my suitcase and asked calmly, "Wasn't Dad supposedly dying?" The entire room froze. My father awkwardly looked away while my mother forced out a nervous laugh. "It was a false alarm, the hospital said he's fine now." Then she added, "We just wanted one last family reunion before you leave for university." Family reunion. Honestly, hearing that from them almost made me laugh out loud, but instead, I just nodded and played along. Then I noticed my sister sitting silently in the corner of the room. And wow, she looked horrible. Dark circles, messy hair, pale skin. The confident, top scorer from a few weeks ago was completely gone. When she looked at me, I saw three things in her eyes at once. Fear, resentment, desperation, like someone watching the only lifeboat drifting away. I ignored her completely and went to my room, or more accurately, the storage closet they renamed my bedroom. Tiny, dark, no sunlight. Meanwhile, my sister had always gotten the huge master bedroom, because in that house, even the walls knew who the favorite child was. The second I entered my room, I started checking everything carefully. Then I took out my backup phone and hid it deep inside the clutter on my shelf. Camera facing the door, silent recording on, cloud upload active. At that point I trusted hidden cameras more than my own family. Then I lay on the bed pretending to rest while secretly listening to everything happening outside. And weirdly enough, that night my mother cooked an entire table full of food. She even put food onto my plate herself. Yeah, the manipulation was getting terrifyingly obvious. Nobody suddenly becomes a loving parent overnight, especially not after 18 years. So while eating dinner, I kept waiting for the real conversation to begin. And eventually, my father finally cleared his throat. "Xiaotian, there's something we want to discuss with you. Your sister hasn't been doing well lately. That exam situation really affected her." My father sighed dramatically and continued, "Your sister is depressed. She barely leaves her room anymore." Then my mother jumped in immediately. "You're her brother, her twin. Blood is thicker than water." Ah yes, funny how, blood is thicker than water only matters when they need something. I stayed quiet and just watched them, and after a few seconds, my sister suddenly looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Brother, I know I was wrong. I treated you badly. Can you give me another chance?" Honestly, if there was an Oscar category for manipulation, my family would have swept the competition. But I was tired of pretending, so I looked directly at them and asked, "What exactly do you want from me?" The room went silent. Then my parents exchanged a glance, like two scammers finally realizing the customer had read the contract. And finally my father said it. "Xiao Xiao told us about the connection between your scores. Yeah, the secret was out. Apparently my sister had confessed everything. The 10-point rule, the linked scores, all of it." Then my father dropped the real bombshell. "Your mother and I were thinking, why don't you postpone university for 1 year? Retake the exam with your sister next year. That way both of you can enter a top university together." I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not because it was shocking anymore, but because they said it so casually. Like sacrificing my future was the most normal thing in the world. My mother even grabbed my hand and started smiling. "Think about it, Xiaotian. This is a win-win situation. You're smart enough to get in again next year, and your sister can finally have a future too. A win-win, yeah, for everyone except me." So I stared at them and asked, I already earned my acceptance letter, why would I throw away my future just to fix her life? And my father immediately waved his hand dismissively like my future meant nothing. My father looked at me like I was being unreasonable. Then he said something so insane I almost laughed. What's the big deal about an acceptance letter? If you don't register, it becomes invalid anyway. And then came the classic guilt trip combo. You're the older brother. Help your sister. When she becomes successful, she'll take care of you. Yeah, because apparently my future career plan was now, work hard so your sister can maybe share allowance money later. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, no. That one word changed the entire atmosphere instantly, and my sister's fake tears disappeared so fast it honestly deserved slow motion replay. My father stood up. What kind of attitude is that? We're discussing this properly with you. I finally snapped. Properly? You want me to throw away my future for someone who scored 157 points? You ignored me for 18 years, used me for her grades, abandoned me in the countryside, and now suddenly I'm important again? Nobody answered, because deep down, they knew I was right. Then my sister suddenly screamed, those scores should have been mine anyway, and honestly, that sentence told me everything. Not even guilt, not even shame, just entitlement. So I looked directly at her and said, no, every single point was earned by me. You stealing my score was luck, not talent, and I'm done letting you live off my life. For a second, she looked genuinely speechless. Then my mother rushed over screaming at me about family and conscience. At that point I was exhausted, so I just walked into my room and locked the door. Outside, the entire house exploded into chaos. My father yelling, my mother crying, my sister screaming. Honestly, it sounded less like a family discussion and more like a reality show getting cancelled live on air. But strangely, I felt calm, because I knew this wasn't over yet. People who spend 18 years controlling someone don't suddenly give up overnight. So that night, I stayed awake listening carefully, and around 2 a.m., I finally heard it, whispering outside my door. Then my mother quietly said, why don't we just take his documents while he's asleep? I stayed completely still and listened from inside my room. Then my father replied, the lights are off, he's probably asleep, let's do it tonight. Yeah. My own parents were plotting against me like cartoon villains outside my bedroom door. Honestly, at that point I wasn't even shocked anymore. The doorknob slowly turned. Thankfully, I had locked it. After a few seconds, my mother whispered angrily, forget it, he can't escape anyway. Then the footsteps faded away. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling in the dark. And in that moment, one thing became crystal clear. The second I returned home, I walked straight into a trap. But luckily for me, I came prepared too. The next morning, I tried opening my bedroom door, locked. From the outside, my heart immediately sank. Then I checked the window, metal security bars, no escape, and somehow the internet in the apartment had mysteriously stopped working too. Yeah, totally normal behavior from a loving family. I used mobile data to quietly message my future roommates. Situation is getting serious. Stay alert. Around 10 a.m., my mother finally unlocked the door and walked in carrying porridge. She sat it down beside me and asked softly, have you thought things through? I stayed silent. Then suddenly her tone changed. Cold, threatening, calculated. Even if you get into a top university, how will you afford it? Do you think we'll pay for your tuition? Without us, you'll come crawling back eventually. Then she smiled slightly. And honestly, your admission letter might not even exist by then. There it was. The threat, crystal clear. Either sacrifice my future willingly, or they would destroy it themselves. After she left, the door locked again. That's when I realized the truth. I was no longer a son in that house. I was a prisoner. The first day, I stayed calm. The second day, panic started creeping in. But because time was running out, university registration was getting closer every hour. So on the third night, I made my move. After everyone finally went to sleep, I quietly took apart a nail clipper and used the tiny metal file to pick the old lock. Honestly, years of living in that house had apparently unlocked side quests I never asked for. 10 minutes later, click, the lock opened. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped into the dark hallway. The apartment was completely dark. I moved slowly through the hallway, and just as my fingers touched the front door handle, the lights suddenly turned on. I froze. My father was standing there holding a wooden stick, waiting for me. That's when I realized, they already expected me to run, trying to escape back toward my room. But he moved first. Behind him, my mother and sister appeared from their rooms, and neither of them tried to stop him. Not once. I still remember lying on the floor afterward, my entire body shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Because after 18 years, I finally understood something. These people would rather destroy me than lose control over me. My father stood above me breathing heavily and said, "You're never leaving this house unless you agree to repeat the exam." Then they dragged me back into my room and locked the door again, this time with an external padlock. Yeah, at this point my family had officially upgraded from emotional abuse to full prison DLC. My back burned with pain, but weirdly, that beating made my mind even clearer. So for the next 2 days, I stopped resisting completely. I ate normally, acted obedient, and eventually, my parents relaxed a little, but secretly, I was studying them now, their schedules, because if I wanted to survive this, I needed timing. Then on the 4th night, they finally made their move. At exactly 2:07 a.m., I heard the lock quietly opening. Not testing, unlocking. I immediately closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. Then I heard soft footsteps enter the room. My parents. And a few seconds later, they started searching through my things. Desk drawers, books, backpack. I knew exactly what they wanted. My ID card, my admission letter, the only 2 things standing between me and freedom. My mother whispered nervously, "Search again." He couldn't have taken them out of the room. They tore through my room like police executing a raid. Drawers emptied, books thrown everywhere. Then suddenly, my sister walked in, and unlike my parents, she wasn't pretending to be gentle anymore. I could literally feel her staring at me while I pretended to sleep. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "Stop acting. I know you're awake." Honestly, that voice gave me chills. Still I continue my acting. Then she started searching like a maniac. Books flew off shelves. Drawers got ripped out completely. And finally, she grabbed my pillow. That's when my heart dropped, because hidden inside the pillow lining was my ID card. She tore the pillow open without hesitation and then suddenly screamed. She found it. Before I could react, she lunged toward my suitcase next. Clothes flew everywhere. Then came the sound I'll never forget. She was tearing open the suitcase lining, and a few seconds later, her fingers touched the envelope hidden inside. My university admission letter. That's when I finally sat up and turned on the light. And honestly, the scene looked insane. My room was destroyed, and standing in the middle of it all was my sister holding my future in her hands like stolen treasure. So I looked at them coldly and asked, "What exactly are you people doing?" At that point, my parents finally stopped pretending. My father slammed my ID card onto the table and said, "Your sister explained everything. As long as you're around, she can succeed. So stop resisting and accept your responsibility." Responsibility, yeah. Apparently being born in that family automatically made me a full-time unpaid academic support system. My mother stepped closer and said, "You're staying home next year. You'll retake the exam with Xiao. Then both of you can attend top universities." I stood up immediately. No. And the second I tried taking my ID card back, my father shoved me into the wall. Pain exploded through my back instantly. Then he leaned toward me and said quietly, "You think you have a choice? Without your ID card, without your documents, you're not going anywhere." And honestly, that was the moment I fully realized something terrifying. My family wasn't trying to persuade me anymore. They were trying to own me. My father kept talking like this was some reasonable family compromise. You can still attend university later. Nobody's ruining your future. Yeah, apparently imprisoning your son and stealing his identity documents now counts as temporary inconvenience. I wanted to explode, but I held it in, because I still needed more evidence. I asked quietly, "So tonight you came here to confiscate my things?" My mother actually laughed. "Confiscate? We're your parents. Keeping your ID card for you is normal." Normal. That word almost made me sick. Then I looked at my sister. She was holding my university admission letter in her hands like she had just won a war. And then, she slowly tore it in half, right in front of me. That sound, I'll probably remember it forever. But she didn't stop there. She kept tearing it over and over again until little paper fragments covered the floor. My future looked like confetti at her feet. And then she smiled. Actually smiled. "Without this," she said, "how are you going to report to university?" Then suddenly she started screaming, completely unhinged. "Why are you better than me? Why does everyone praise you? Those scores should have been mine." And honestly, for the first time in my life, I saw the real her. Not arrogant, not confident, terrified. She admitted she had always known the truth. Every exam terrified her. She was scared I wouldn't take the test. Scared I'd fail. Scared everyone would discover she was a fraud. Then she finally said the most honest thing she had ever said. "I'm nothing without you." And that line hit hard. Because after 18 years, the golden child finally admitted the truth. She wasn't special. She was addicted. Addicted to living off my life. Then she looked at me with tears and said, "So you can't leave. You have to stay with me forever." Honestly, for a second, I almost pitied her. But pity doesn't erase abuse. and it definitely doesn't justify destroying someone else's future. Meanwhile, my parents just stood there watching everything happen. No shock, no guilt. If anything, they looked satisfied, like this entire nightmare made perfect sense to them. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. My sister didn't become like this alone. My parents created her. My mother immediately sneered. "What are you crying for now? It's not a big deal. You can just retake the exam next year." Then my father added, "Maybe this will teach you to be more obedient." So I slowly crouched down and started picking up the torn pieces from the floor. My sister watched me with this disgusting smile on her face. "Cry harder," she said. "This is your fate." Then I looked up at her, and suddenly, her smile disappeared, because there were no tears in my eyes. Only hatred, and a smile. She instinctively stepped backward and asked, "Why are you laughing?" So I looked at her calmly and said, "Nothing, I was just thinking, with acting skills like yours, maybe you should become an actress someday." For a second, nobody spoke. Then I pretended to completely give up. I sat on the edge of the bed staring blankly into space like my spirit had finally broken. And slowly, they relaxed. My sister started looking proud again. My father stuffed my ID card into his pocket and said, "Good. From now on, this kid isn't leaving the house." Then they walked out together like they had just completed some heroic family mission. The door locked behind them again. Click. And the second their footsteps disappeared, I stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out my backup phone. Still recording. They searched the entire room, but never checked the pile of random junk beside the shelf, which meant I had everything. My sister tearing up the admission letter. Honestly, watching that recording felt surreal, because even I couldn't believe a family could act like that. So immediately, I uploaded multiple backups to the cloud. Then I edited a shorter version and posted it online with one sentence. "This is why I wanted to escape." After that, I called the police. And for the first time in my life, I said the words out loud. "My family is illegally detaining me." The operator took my information and said officers were on the way. Then the waiting began. I hid the phone again, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling while my heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. Because I knew something important. If I survived tonight, my life would finally change forever. Hours passed slowly. The sky outside started getting lighter. Then at exactly 4:23 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my door. Soft, careful. My sister. She stopped outside my door. Then, click, the lock opened. I kept my eyes closed and pretended to sleep while my heartbeat pounded so hard it felt painful. She walked slowly around the room searching through everything again. And then, her footsteps stopped near the bookshelf. My stomach dropped instantly, because that's where the backup phone was hidden. I heard her digging through the clutter for a few seconds. Then suddenly, complete silence. A second later, I heard her whisper, "What is this?" I opened my eyes immediately. Too late. She was already holding the phone, and the red recording light was still on. Her expression changed instantly from confusion to absolute panic. Lin Tian. Then she attacked me. Not slap, not pushed. Attack. Her nails scratched across my face while we struggled on the floor, knocking everything over. The bedside lamp shattered. The table flipped. And within seconds my parents rushed into the room. But the craziest part, my father didn't even ask what happened. The second he entered, he shoved me away. "How dare you hit your sister?" Meanwhile my sister stood behind him clutching the phone like she had discovered a bomb. "Dad." He secretly recorded everything. The moment my father looked at the screen, his face completely changed. Pure panic. Because now they understood something important. I had evidence. Then without hesitation, he smashed the phone onto the ground, again, until it was completely destroyed. Honestly, he looked less like an angry parent, and more like a criminal destroying evidence in a movie. But here's the funny part. I wasn't scared at all, because the video had already uploaded to the cloud hours earlier. That phone, just a decoy now. Still, I pretended to panic, pretended to look hopeless. Because the more confident they felt, the less careful they became, yelling immediately, "If you post this online, you'll regret it. Reflect on what you've done." Yeah, apparently exposing your kidnappers was now considered bad behavior. Then they locked the door again, but this time, I heard them dragging furniture in front of it too. A chair, maybe more. At that point, my own bedroom officially had better security than a prison cell. And yet strangely, I still felt calm, because they thought they had destroyed the evidence. But outside that room, their entire world was already starting to collapse. I sat alone in the dark room surrounded by broken furniture and torn paper. My face hurt. My back hurt. A few hours later, around 6 a.m., everything finally exploded. I suddenly heard my father shouting from outside, "Who uploaded this video?" Then my mother started screaming. My sister started crying. The whole apartment instantly descended into chaos. And honestly, after 18 years of silence, that sound was beautiful, because for the first time in my life, they were the ones panicking, not me. Then came the loud knocking at the front door. Police. The apartment went completely silent for a second. Then I heard frantic whispering outside. Hide him. Tell them he's not here. Then the police shouted again. Open the door now or we'll force entry. A few moments later, my father finally opened it. I couldn't hear every word clearly, but I could tell he was desperately trying to explain things away, calling it a misunderstanding. Classic family issue. Then finally, the furniture blocking my door got moved aside, the lock opened, and two police officers stepped into my room. The younger officer looked around at the destroyed furniture, my bruised face. His expression changed immediately. Are you Lin Tian? I nodded. Then he asked quietly, did your family do this to you? Before I could answer, my father immediately interrupted. This is a family matter. I'm disciplining my own son. The older officer turned around fast. Illegal detention, physical assault. Then at the video on his phone, and destruction of personal property. You call this a family matter? Honestly, that was probably the first time in my life someone had actually defended me. Then the officer turned back toward me and said, you need to come with us and give a statement. I nodded quietly. Then I stood up and walked out of that room, stepping over the torn pieces of my admission letter one last time. As I passed my father, he suddenly reached out like he wanted to stop me again, but the police officer immediately shoved his arm away. Back off, he said coldly. I didn't even look back. I just walked straight toward the police car. Behind me, my mother started screaming, Xiao Tian, you can't do this to us. We're your parents. That's when I finally stopped, and for the first time in my life, I said exactly what I truly felt. You stopped treating me like a human a long time ago. Now it's your turn to suffer the consequences. My sister suddenly lost control and screamed, you'll regret this. I won't let you go. I looked at her one last time, at the girl who had spent 18 years stealing my life. Then I said calmly, from today onward, we're strangers. And after that, I got into the police car without turning back again. A few hours later, after giving my statement, the police confirmed everything. My father was being investigated for assault and illegal detention. My sister would also face legal consequences for destroying my personal property and documents. And thankfully, my university admission documents could be reissued, meaning after everything they did, they still failed to stop me. When I finally walked out of the police station, it was already noon. The sunlight was so bright I had to squint, and honestly, standing there felt unreal, like I had finally woken up from an 18-year nightmare. For the first time in my life, my future finally belonged to me. And that's the end of the story. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more crazy stories like this. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.